They found him in the torpedo room at 300 hours, standing perfectly still, staring at tube number 4. When Carter asked him what he was doing, Petty Officer Daniels whispered, "Sir, someone's inside." Captain William Ironhand Carter had seen many things in his 23 years beneath the waves. Enemy destroyers hunting him like wolves, depth charges that shook his teeth loose, men breaking under pressure, literally and figuratively. He'd watched sailors go mad from claustrophobia, seen hull plates buckle under crushing ocean weight, pulled drowning men from flooded compartments with his bare hands. But he'd never seen this. It was the third night of their patrol in the Sea of Japan, 1944. The USS Phantom was running silent at 200 meters, deep enough to avoid detection but shallow enough to surface quickly if needed. Carter was reviewing navigation charts in his quarters when Chief Petty Officer Bull Rodriguez knocked on the bulkhead door. Bull was a mountain of a man, 6'4", 240 pounds of pure muscle earned from years of hauling torpedoes and wrestling with depth charges. His hands were scarred from burns and cuts, his face weathered like old leather. But his eyes were sharp, always watching, always calculating. "Captain, you need to come and see this." Bull's voice was steady, but Carter knew him well enough to hear the tremor underneath. Bull had survived 2 sub-sinkings and a torpedo strike that killed half his previous crew. Nothing rattled him. Until tonight. Carter followed Bull through the narrow corridor, their boots making soft thuds on the metal deck. The submarine's usual symphony of sounds, the hum of electric motors, the ping of sonar, the hiss of air recyclers, felt different somehow, muted, like the ship itself was holding its breath. They passed through the crew quarters, where off-duty sailors slept in stacked bunks so narrow a man had to lie perfectly straight. The smell of diesel fuel, sweat, and coffee mixed into that distinctive submarine aroma that never quite left your clothes or skin. They reached the torpedo room. Petty Officer James Daniels stood exactly where Bull said he would be, motionless, face pale as chalk, eyes locked on torpedo tube number 4. The young sailor's lips moved silently, like he was counting or praying. Daniels was 20 years old, fresh from basic training, still had that eager look that combat hadn't erased yet. He'd joined the Phantom 3 months ago, replacing a sonar man who'd transferred to surface duty after what the Navy politely called psychological strain. "Daniels," Carter said quietly. "Report." Daniels didn't turn. His voice came out in a hoarse whisper. "Sir, there's someone inside the tube." Carter's pulse didn't quicken. Years of command had taught him to control his reactions. A submarine captain who panicked was a dead captain, and a dead captain meant a dead crew. But his mind went into overdrive, calculating possibilities, running through procedures, preparing for whatever crisis was unfolding. "Explain." "I was running the pre-dawn safety check, sir. Standard procedure. I put my ear to tube 4 to listen for leaks, and Daniels swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed visibly. "I heard breathing, Captain. Human breathing, and then knocking from inside the tube." Bull crossed his arms, his massive biceps straining against his uniform sleeves. "I checked it myself, Captain. Tubes sealed. Has been for 2 days. Nothing could be—" Knock, knock, knock. All 3 men froze. The sound was faint but unmistakable. 3 deliberate strikes against metal coming from inside torpedo tube number 4. It wasn't the random ping of thermal expansion or the groan of metal under pressure. This was rhythmic, purposeful, human. Carter stepped forward, his jaw set in that expression his crew knew meant he'd made a decision. "Open it." "Sir?" Bull's eyebrows shot up. In all their years serving together, he'd never questioned Carter's orders. Until now. "You heard me, Chief. Crack the seal." Slowly. Bull hesitated only a second before moving to the access panel. His massive hands worked the wheel lock with practiced precision, decades of muscle memory guiding every movement. The seal hissed as pressure equalized, a sound like the submarine itself exhaling. Carter's hand instinctively moved to his sidearm. Not that a pistol would do much good against whatever might be inside, but the weight was comforting. The tube was empty. Completely, impossibly empty, just cold metal and the faint smell of machine oil. Daniels made a small noise in his throat, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "But I heard knock, knock, knock." This time the sound came from tube number 3. Daniels stumbled backward, his boots scraping on the deck. Bull's hand shot out to steady him. Carter's jaw tightened. "Chief, check the manifest. When was the last time we loaded these tubes?" Bull pulled the logbook from its wall mount, flipping through pages with thick fingers that somehow managed to be gentle with the delicate paper. His brow furrowed as he read. "Tube 4 was loaded with a Mark 14 on departure, sir. Fired 6 days ago at that Japanese freighter. Tube 3, he stopped. "What is it?" "Tube 3 hasn't been loaded since Pearl Harbor, Captain. 8 months ago. According to this, it's been completely empty this entire patrol." "That's impossible," Daniels whispered. "I checked it yesterday. It was knock, 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 knock." The knocking was louder now, more insistent, and it wasn't coming from one tube anymore. It was coming from all 6. The sound echoed through the torpedo room, bouncing off metal walls, creating a cacophony that made it impossible to think. Each strike was perfectly synchronized, like 6 invisible hands pounding in unison, but what really sent ice through Carter's veins was the pattern. 3 knocks, pause. 5 knocks, pause. 3 knocks again. It was Morse code. The international distress signal. SOS. Carter's mind raced through possibilities. Malfunction, water hammer, thermal expansion, trapped air pockets creating acoustic phenomena. But none of those explanations fit the pattern. This was deliberate, rhythmic, human, and it was coming from sealed tubes that had been empty for months. "Wake Lieutenant Morrison," Carter ordered, his voice cutting through the knocking. "I want a full systems diagnostic, and get Sonar Man Chen down here. Tell him to scan for any anomalies in the immediate area, other vessels, underwater structures, anything that might explain acoustic reflections." As Bull hurried off, Carter approached the torpedo tubes. The knocking had stopped, but the silence felt worse somehow. Heavier, like the pause before a depth charge explodes. The torpedo room was one of the most cramped spaces on the submarine. Barely enough room for 3 men to stand comfortably between the tubes and the maintenance equipment. Overhead pipes dripped condensation, and the red emergency lights cast everything in a hellish glow. Daniels hadn't moved. His hands trembled as he stared at the tubes. "Captain, my grandfather was a submariner, served on the S-boats in World War I. He told me stories about boats that went down and, sir, he said sometimes the ocean doesn't let go, that submarines remember, that the men who died in them leave something behind." "Daniels, the USS Greyback, sir. Lost with all hands in 44. They say her crew still signals sometimes, trying to find their way home. The Wahoo, the Sculpin, the Tang, all those boats the Navy says just disappeared. My grandfather said they didn't disappear. They're still down there, still trying to surface, still knocking on their hull trying to get out." Carter put a firm hand on the young sailor's shoulder. "Petty officer, I need you focused. Fear is as dangerous as any torpedo down here. More dangerous because fear spreads. One man panics, the whole crew panics. And panic underwater means death. Understand?" Daniels nodded, but his eyes betrayed him. Carter had seen that look before, the 1,000-yard stare of a man who'd glimpsed something his mind couldn't process. Combat did that to some men. Broke something, fundamental in their ability to separate reality from nightmare. 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Jake Hawk Morrison arrived with Sonar Man Tommy Chen. Morrison was Carter's executive officer, 32 years old, sharp as a blade, analytical mind that could calculate firing solutions faster than most men could read a compass. He'd graduated top of his class at Annapolis, turned down multiple surface command positions to serve on submarines because, as he once told Carter, any fool can fight on the surface. It takes a real sailor to fight in 3 dimensions. Morrison was skeptical of anything he couldn't measure, touch, or prove with mathematics, which made him an excellent XO and a terrible person to explain ghost stories to. "Captain, I've run every diagnostic we have," Morrison said, holding a clipboard covered in technical readouts and calculations. "Tubes are sealed, no pressure anomalies, no mechanical failures, acoustic sensors show no vibrations or impacts. Whatever Daniels heard, Tommy Chen interrupted, his headphones still on, one hand adjusting the sonar dials. Tommy was the youngest officer on board, barely 23, but he had the best ears Carter had ever encountered. Could identify ship types by engine signature from miles away, could hear a destroyer's screws before anyone else picked up even a whisper on the hydrophones. "Sir, I'm picking up something strange." Carter turned. "Define strange." "There's a signal on an old frequency, pre-war band. It's weak, but it's definitely man-made. Not natural ocean noise, not biological. This is equipment." Chen adjusted his instruments, frowning. The soft green glow from the sonar scope illuminated his face, making him look even younger. "Sir, it's Morse code." The control room went silent. Even Morrison stopped mid-sentence, his clipboard forgotten. "What's it saying?" Carter asked, though part of him already knew, already dreaded the answer. Chen listened for a long moment, his face growing paler with each second. His hand moved automatically, transcribing the dots and dashes onto a notepad. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "It's repeating the same message over and over, Captain. This is USS Barracuda, hull breach, unable to surface, 57 souls. Please respond." Morrison's clipboard clattered to the deck, the sound impossibly loud in the sudden silence. The USS Barracuda. Every man in that room knew that name. Every submariner in the Pacific knew that name. The Barracuda had disappeared in these exact waters 2 years ago. March 1942. She'd been on a routine patrol, hunting Japanese supply convoys, when she simply vanished. No distress call, no wreckage, no oil slick, no debris field. The Navy had searched for 3 weeks before declaring her lost with all hands. 57 men, including Carter's former mentor, Captain Robert Old Iron Donovan. Donovan had been Carter's commanding officer when he was just a green lieutenant, had taught him everything about commanding a submarine, how to read the ocean, how to hunt prey without becoming prey, how to keep men sane when you're sealed in a steel tube hundreds of feet underwater for months at a time. Donovan had recommended Carter for his first command, had been at Carter's promotion ceremony, shaking his hand with that iron grip and saying, "You'll be better than me, Willie. Already are in some ways." Willie. Nobody called him that anymore. Just Donovan. "That's impossible," Morrison breathed. His analytical mind was visibly struggling to process this. The Barracuda's been gone for 2 years. There's no way her radio equipment would still be functioning. The batteries would be long dead, and even if by some miracle they weren't, the signal wouldn't carry this far from the ocean floor. "Maybe someone's using her call sign," Bull suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Enemy psychological warfare. They fake a distress call to lure us into a trap." Carter shook his head. "The Japanese don't know our radio protocols. They wouldn't know the exact distress format we use, the specific frequency bands. And they certainly wouldn't know the Barracuda's call sign. That information is classified. So, what are you saying, Captain?" Morrison's voice had an edge to it. "That we're receiving a message from a ghost ship? That the Barracuda is somehow transmitting from the bottom of the ocean after 2 years? Before Carter could answer, the lights went out. Not a gradual dimming, but instant, complete darkness. The kind of darkness that only exists deep underwater, where not a single photon of sunlight penetrates. Emergency red lamps flickered to life, bathing everything in crimson. And in that hellish glow, Carter saw something that would haunt him forever. The torpedo tube doors were opening, all 6 of them. Slowly, impossibly, against every mechanical lock and safety protocol the Navy had invented. The massive breech doors, each one weighing hundreds of pounds, designed to withstand ocean pressure that could crush a man like an insect, was sliding open as if moved by invisible hands. And from the darkness inside, water began to pour. Not seawater. This water was different, black as oil, cold as death, and it didn't flow like normal water. It crawled across the deck like something alive, reaching toward the crew with finger-like tendrils. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Carter's breath came out in visible puffs. "Seal the compartment!" Carter roared, his command voice cutting through the rising panic. Bull was already moving, his massive frame lunging for the emergency bulkhead control. Steel doors throughout the submarine began to slam shut with hydraulic hisses, sectioning off the torpedo room from the rest of the vessel. Standard procedure when facing a flood: contain the damage, sacrifice one compartment to save the ship. But Carter stayed. So did Morrison, Chen, and Daniels, because something was emerging from the water. At first, it looked like kelp, strands of something organic, waving in the black water that defied physics by flowing upward against gravity. But then Carter realized with mounting horror that they weren't plants. They were fingers, human fingers, bone-white and skeletal, reaching out from the torpedo tubes. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, grasping at nothing and everything. Daniels screamed, a raw sound of pure terror that echoed off the metal walls. Morrison backed against the bulkhead, his rational mind visibly shattering as it tried to reconcile what his eyes were seeing with everything he knew about physics and reality. Tommy Chen dropped his headphones, hands shaking so badly he couldn't grip them. But Carter stood firm, because commanding a submarine had taught him one unshakable truth: panic kills faster than any weapon. A captain who loses control loses his ship, and losing your ship underwater means everyone dies. "Hold your ground." Carter's voice cut through the fear like a blade. "It's not real. It can't be real. We're experiencing some kind of shared hallucination. Carbon dioxide buildup affecting our brains. Everyone, stay calm and—" But even as he said it, one of the hands found purchase on the deck, then another. And slowly, impossibly, something pulled itself out of a torpedo tube number 4. It was a man, or what was left of one. He wore a submariner's uniform, tattered and covered in barnacles. His skin was translucent, like he'd been underwater for years. Patches of exposed bone showed through where flesh had rotted away. His hair floated around his head as if he were still submerged. And his eyes, God, his eyes were still open, still moving, still seeing. Carter's breath caught in his throat, because he recognized that face. Even decomposed, even transformed into this nightmare, he knew those features. "Captain Donovan," Carter whispered, the name escaping his lips before his rational mind could stop it. The thing that had once been Robert Donovan tilted its head, water streaming from its mouth in a continuous flow that defied physics. When it spoke, its voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of the ocean, distorted and echoing, words bubbling up through water. "Willie, you came. I knew you'd come." Only one person had ever called Carter Willie, his mentor, his friend, the man who'd taught him everything about being a submarine captain, the man who'd been dead for 2 years, lying in a crushed submarine somewhere on the ocean floor. "This isn't real," Morrison said, more to himself than anyone else. His back was pressed flat against the bulkhead, as if trying to phase through solid steel. "Decompression sickness, nitrogen narcosis, carbon monoxide poisoning. We're hallucinating." "All of you?" Carter snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut through Morrison's spiral. "We're all having the exact same hallucination. We're all seeing the same impossible thing." More figures emerged from the tubes, men in various states of decay, all wearing Barracuda patches on their tattered uniforms. Carter recognized some of them. Lieutenant Harris, who'd been Donovan's XO. Chief Martinez, who could fix any mechanical problem with just a wrench and determination. Young Ensign Patterson, fresh out of the academy, who'd talked constantly about his pregnant wife back home. All dead, all rotting, all standing in his torpedo room, dripping that impossible black water onto the deck. They didn't attack, they didn't threaten, they just stood there, water pooling around their feet, staring at Carter's crew with expressions of infinite sadness, like prisoners watching through bars, like drowning men watching a rescue ship sail past. Donovan took a step forward. The movement was wrong, joints bending in directions they shouldn't, like his bones had been crushed by unimaginable pressure and healed incorrectly. His waterlogged boots made squelching sounds on the metal deck. "We tried to surface, Willie. We tried so hard. The hull breached at 400 meters. Emergency blow wouldn't work. We tried everything. Everything. But the pressure, it wouldn't let us go. The ocean wanted us, claimed us. It's been so dark, so cold. Do you know what it's like to drown for 2 years? To feel your lungs fill with water over and over, never stopping, never ending?" Carter's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to seal the bulkhead, to flood the compartment and purge whatever this was. But something kept him rooted. Maybe duty, maybe curiosity, maybe the part of him that had loved Donovan like a father and never got to say goodbye. "What do you want?" Carter's voice was steady, but inside he was crumbling, watching his rational worldview dissolve like salt in water. Donovan's skeletal hand reached out, dripping. "We're still sinking, Willie. We've been sinking for 2 years, down and down and down. The ocean floor keeps dropping away beneath us. We pass through rock like it's not even there. We're falling through the earth itself, falling toward the center, and we can't stop. We need you to stop it." "Stop what? How can I?" "The descent. We're trapped between. Not alive, not dead, not in the world anymore, but not fully gone from it. The ocean took us, but it won't keep us, won't let us rest. We need—" Donovan's voice cracked, and impossibly, tears ran down his decomposed face, mixing with the water that constantly streamed from his eyes. "We need someone to remember us, to acknowledge we existed, to finish what we started." Behind Donovan, the other ghostly figures began to move, forming a circle around Carter and his crew. They moved with that same wrong-jointedness, like puppets with broken strings. They didn't seem hostile, just desperate, lost, like sailors clinging to wreckage in a storm, hoping for rescue that would never come. Tommy Chen's voice cracked. "Captain, the sonar—" "What about it?" "It's reading depth, sir. Our depth. But it says—" Chen's face went ashen, all color draining away. His hands trembled as he checked the readings again, hoping he'd misread. "It says we're at 900 meters. That's impossible. Our crush depth is 400. At 900 meters, the pressure would be—" Carter's blood turned to ice. 900 meters. Nothing could survive at that depth. The pressure would be crushing. Absolute. Hull plates would buckle like cardboard. Rivets would pop like bullets. The submarine would collapse into a ball of twisted metal no bigger than a car. Every man aboard would be crushed instantly, their bodies compressed into paste. But they weren't crushed. They were intact, breathing, talking, moving, unless they weren't anymore, unless they'd already died and just didn't know it yet. "Check it again," Carter ordered, but his voice sounded distant to his own ears. "There has to be a malfunction. The depth gauge is broken. It has to be broken." But Chen shook his head, his young face aged by horror. "I checked 3 times, Captain. Different systems. They all show the same reading, 900 meters and descending. We're sinking at a rate of 10 meters per minute." Morrison lunged for the ballast controls. "Emergency blow! We need to surface now!" His hands flew across the panel, hitting switches, turning valves, but nothing happened. The ballast tanks didn't respond. The submarine didn't rise. "We're not at 900 meters, Carter said slowly, pieces clicking into place like tumblers in a lock. A terrible, impossible truth taking shape in his mind. "We're not anywhere. We're—" Donovan finished the sentence, his waterlogged voice almost gentle. "You're with us now, Willie. In the place between. The ocean took us, and now it wants you too. It's been waiting. It knew you'd come. It always knows when submarines enter its territory, this patch of water. It's hungry. Has been for decades, maybe centuries. How many boats have gone down here that the Navy never found? How many crews are still falling through the dark?" Carter felt the deck shift beneath his feet. Not physically, the submarine wasn't moving, but reality was, like standing on solid ground that suddenly revealed itself as quicksand. Morrison was screaming now, pounding on the bulkhead controls. "Open the hatch! Someone open the goddamn hatch!" But when he grabbed the wheel, his hand passed through it like smoke, like he was the ghost, not Donovan. Daniel sobbed, sliding down the wall. "We're dead. We're all dead. We died and didn't even know it." "No!" Carter's voice cracked like a whip. "We're still alive. We have to be. This is some kind of trick. Some kind of psychological warfare, some kind of—" "Captain!" Tommy Chen pointed at the bulkhead window with a shaking finger. Through the reinforced glass, they could see into the control room, and what they saw made no sense. Made no sense at all. The control room was flooded, not with water, but with bodies. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all in various states of decay, all wearing submarine crew uniforms from different eras. Some from World War II, some from World War I, some in uniforms so old they had to be from the Spanish-American War. Some wore diving suits from the 1800s. Some wore nothing but rotted rags. They stood motionless, faces turned toward the torpedo room, watching, waiting. Their dead eyes reflected the red emergency lights, making them glow like demons. "How many submarines have gone down in these waters?" Carter whispered, the question rhetorical because he already knew the answer. Too many, dozens over the decades, maybe more. And if what Donovan said was true, they were all still here, all still falling, all trapped in this underwater purgatory. Donovan's broken smile was terrible to see. Lips pulled back from exposed teeth, jaw hanging at an unnatural angle. Hundreds, Willie. The ocean is hungry here. It's been hungry for a very long time. Since before men built ships. Since before anything lived on land. This is a thin place, where the world of the living touches something else, something darker, something that feeds on despair and isolation and the particular terror of drowning in the dark. And it collects us, keeps us, makes us part of it. "I won't accept that," Carter said firmly, drawing on every ounce of command authority he'd accumulated over decades of service. "There's always a way out. There's always a solution. Every problem has an answer. That's what you taught me. Remember? You said—" "A choice," Donovan interrupted. "Yes, there is always a choice. I did teach you that, and I meant it. Even here, even in this place, there are choices." The ghostly captain pointed at the torpedo tubes. 6 of them, 6 dark openings, 6 possible paths. "One of these tubes leads back, Willie. Back to the real ocean, back to life. The others—" Donovan's eyes, hollow sockets filled with dark water that swirled like miniature whirlpools, bored into Carter. "The others lead deeper, to where we are, to where you'll stay forever. Choose wrong, and you become like us. Choose right, and you escape. But you have to choose. You have to trust, and you have to do it now, because with every second, this boat falls deeper into the dark, and the path back gets narrower." Carter looked at his crew. Bull had returned at some point, along with the rest of the men, all crammed into the torpedo room, all staring at the impossible choice before them. 43 souls looking to him for salvation, 43 men who trusted him with their lives. "How do we know which one?" Morrison asked, his voice hoarse from screaming. "How do we know which tube is the right one?" "You don't," Donovan said simply. "You choose, you trust, and you hope the ocean is merciful. Though I should warn you, the ocean is never merciful. It just is. Vast and dark and hungry and eternally patient." Carter's mind raced, searching for logic, pattern, some clue hidden in the madness. This couldn't be random. There had to be a key. Donovan wouldn't bring him here just to watch him fail. Would he? Then he saw it. On tube number 4, the first tube where Daniels had heard the knocking, there was a marking. So faint he'd almost missed it. A scratch in the paint, barely visible, forming 3 letters. R.D. Robert Donovan. His mentor had been leaving him a message, a breadcrumb in the darkness. "Tube 4, Carter said with certainty he didn't feel. "We go through tube 4. "Captain, that's insane!" Morrison grabbed his arm, and his hand was solid again, no longer passing through matter. "Those tubes are 8 feet long and 2 feet wide. We can't fit. And even if we could, there's no air, no light, no guarantee of what's on the other side. This is suicide." "Everything down here is suicide, Jake. Has been since we submerged. We're submariners. We chose to fight in the dark, in the cold, in the crushing deep. This is just one more dive." Carter turned to his crew, seeing fear in every face but also trust. They believed in him. God help them, they still believed. "Listen to me, all of you. I've kept you alive through 14 combat patrols, through depth charges that shook our teeth loose and destroyer hunts that lasted 3 days, through storms that should have sunk us and torpedo runs that missed our hull by inches. I'm asking you to trust me one more time, one last time." The men looked at each other. Then, one by one, they nodded. Bull stepped forward first. cracking his knuckles. "Ladies first, Captain." Despite everything, the horror, the impossibility, the certainty of death, Carter almost smiled. Almost. Donovan watched this exchange with something like pride in his ruined face. "You always were the best of us, Willie. That's why the ocean wanted you so badly. Strong leaders are rare down here. Most captains panic, break, drag their crews into the dark with them. But maybe you're strong enough to refuse. Maybe you can do what I couldn't." The ghostly crew began to fade, dissolving back into the black water like ink in a stream. Donovan was the last to go, his form becoming translucent, insubstantial. "Tell my wife I love her," he whispered, his voice barely audible now. "Tell her I tried to come home. Tell her I thought of her every second as we sank. Tell her—" And then he was gone. The black water receded into the tubes. The impossible became merely improbable. The lights flickered back to normal white. The temperature rose to something approaching normal. Carter didn't hesitate. Hesitation was death. "Bull, open tube 4. Everyone else, one at a time, into the tube. No equipment, no hesitation. Go." They moved with the discipline of trained submariners. Daniels went first, the young sailor who'd started all this by hearing impossible knocking. He squeezed into the narrow torpedo tube with difficulty, his body barely fitting. Chen went next, then the engineers, then the navigators. One by one, Carter's crew disappeared into that dark opening, trusting him absolutely. Morrison was second to last. He paused at the tube entrance, looking at Carter with eyes that had seen too much. "Sir, if this doesn't work, if I die in there, it will work. But if it doesn't, I want you to know that serving under you was the greatest honor of my life. You're the finest captain I've ever—" "Jake," Carter's voice was gentle. "Get in the damn tube." Morrison climbed in, his lean frame disappearing into darkness. Carter was alone now, just him and the 6 dark openings, 5 of which led to eternal damnation, and one, maybe, to salvation. He approached tube 4, put his hand on the cold metal, felt the scratches of his mentor's initials under his fingertips, and whispered a prayer to whatever gods looked after foolish submarine captains who led their crews into hell and hoped to find a way back out. Then he climbed in. The tube was crushingly tight. Carter had to exhale completely, emptying his lungs until his chest ached just to squeeze through the opening. Total darkness surrounded him. Darkness so complete it had weight, had texture, had presence. He couldn't move forward or backward, couldn't even tell which way was up or down, just crushing metal all around, squeezing him like a vice, making every breath a struggle. And then he felt hands, not hostile, gentle, pushing him, guiding him, dozens of hands, hundreds maybe, all along his body, moving him forward through the impossible space. The hands of every submariner who'd ever gone down in these waters, giving him one last gift, a way home. Carter emerged in water, real water, cold Pacific water that tasted of salt and life and possibility. His lungs burned, screaming for air, his vision dimmed, black spots dancing at the edges. But he kicked upward, following instinct older than thought, following the pull of a surface he couldn't see but knew had to be there, and broke through, gasping, choking, alive, gloriously, impossibly alive. Around him, his entire crew bobbed in the water, coughing and crying and laughing with the hysteria of those who'd been given a second chance they didn't deserve and couldn't explain. 43 men, all accounted for, all breathing, all real. Behind them, the ocean was empty. No submarine, no USS Phantom. Gone, claimed, added to the ocean's collection of ghost ships that prowled the dark places between worlds. But they were alive. Against all logic, all probability, all reason, they were alive. A destroyer picked them up 3 hours later. The captain of the destroyer couldn't understand how an entire submarine crew ended up floating in the middle of the Pacific with no vessel in sight. No debris field, no oil slick, no explanation. Carter told him they'd been torpedoed, that the sub went down fast, that they'd barely escaped. The destroyer captain didn't believe him. The story had too many holes, too many inconsistencies, but he filed the report anyway. What else could he do? Captain William Ironhand Carter never commanded another submarine. He requested transfer to surface vessels and served out the rest of the war, teaching new officers about submarine warfare at the Naval Academy. He was good at it, patient, understanding, but he never went underwater again, not even to swim. He never told anyone what happened in that torpedo room, not officially, not in any report or debrief or late-night conversation. The Navy ruled it as battle loss, enemy action, crew evacuated, vessel destroyed, standard paperwork, standard grief, standard memorial service. But sometimes, late at night, Carter would visit the submarine memorial in Pearl Harbor, and he'd place his hand on the cold marble wall where the USS Barracuda's name was engraved alongside hundreds of other lost boats. 57 names beneath that boat's designation. 57 souls. "I told her," he'd whisper, his voice barely audible in the Hawaiian night. "Your wife. She knows you loved her. She knows you tried to come home. She knows you thought of her every second. She knows." And sometimes, not every time, but sometimes, he'd feel a hand on his shoulder. Firm, steady, the grip of a mentor who'd taught him everything that mattered. The ocean keeps many secrets. But Captain William Ironhand Carter kept one more. Sometimes, on very quiet nights, when the moon was dark and the sea was calm, he could still hear the knocking. 3 taps, pause. 5 taps, pause. 3 taps again. SOS. From somewhere deep below, where light never reaches and pressure crushes everything human into something else entirely. Where 57 souls were still waiting, still hoping, still sending their signal into the void, still asking someone, anyone, to remember they existed. Captain Carter always answered, in his mind, in his heart, in his dreams. "I remember. I'll always remember. Rest now. Rest." But the knocking never stopped, because the ocean never forgets. And the men who serve beneath its waves, the ones who don't come back, they become part of something older and darker and more patient than any living thing can comprehend. They become the deep, and the deep is eternal.